Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm Jeremy Lott. Joining me today is the Center Square's investigative reporter, TJ Martinell. TJ, we have an amazing contrast of a headline here that I'm going to set up, and it's Death of Our Justice System. Critics object to Washington bill on clemency and pardons. What's going on here?
Yeah, so that statement, death of our justice system, came from Representative Jenny Graham from Spokane. She was talking to colleagues on the House floor on March 4th when they were voting on the bill. And what this bill does is it would reshape the Clemency and Pardons Board in Washington State. And what's unique about Washington is we don't have a parole system the way others do. If you know, for example, Shawshank Redemption, where they go before a parole board. The governor has the sole authority to commute or pardon. And so the only thing that this board can do is make recommendations. So what it does is it expands the number of people on the board, and it also sets up requirements for these members to have, quote, lived experiences in, quote, a community of color. They need to have at least one formerly, I assume, incarcerated individual.
Yeah, I don't think that they're looking for someone who's currently serving time.
What's interesting is there was efforts to try and get a law enforcement official on the board, being represented on the board, and that was rejected.
They also want someone who represents a faith-based organization with interest or experience in community reentry, person involved in tribal affairs, a retired Superior Court judge, and a member of the Crime Victim Representation Agency.
Yeah, and the big controversial part of this bill, there's two parts. One of them is every single member of this board would be required to attend annual training on, quote, race, equity, racism, and mass incarceration or restorative justice. The other part of it is that under current law, you can't have somebody who has been total confinement for life without possibility of parole. They can't be pardoned or released until they've reached age 60. This proposed law would change that and only require that they've served at least 20 years or 25 years for certain crimes. And the thing is that you could have been found guilty of aggravated first-degree murder, and you could potentially get out in 20 years under this bill. And so this is where a lot of people are worried about violent murderers being let out of prison. And what's interesting about this bill is it also swaps out the word offender or person with someone who's been an incarcerated individual. So what it's doing is saying this person's in prison, but we're not going to treat the change in statement.
They just happened into prison. It was like an accident.
Yeah, as opposed to someone who's been found guilty by a jury of committing a very serious and violent crime. It's now they're an incarcerated individual. And statements from the bill sponsor indicate, and from people who testifying in support of the bill, indicate that some of these people could actually be an asset to their community out of prison. The problem that critics have with this is that this includes people, like I just said, who have been found guilty of first-degree murder, which is life sentence without parole. So this is not aggravated assault. This is not, simple assault. This is not involuntary manslaughter. We're talking like premeditated murder.
What are the bill's chances of passing at this point?
Well, it passed in the House 53-42. It's now in the Senate. It had a public hearing in the Ways and Means Committee. It's going to have to get a vote there, and then it'll probably be referred to the Rules Committee. It already cleared the Committee on Human Services. So it's really just a question of whether or not it passes the Ways and Means and then gets out of that chamber before the cutoff date.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more as it develops at thecentersquare.com. For TJ Martinell, this is Jeremy Lott. Please subscribe and thank you for listening.
Freedom and liberty are important to all of us. If you're looking for civil, intellectual conversations with those shaping the future of freedom, try the Future of Freedom podcast with me, Scott Bertram. We speak with leaders across the country in the greater conservative and libertarian movements. In-depth conversations about where the next intellectual battles will happen across the country. It's the Future of Freedom podcast. Find it at americastalking.com or wherever you get your podcasts.